This episode of Where Did the Road Go is brought to you in part by our Patreons. If you want to become a patron, go to wheredidtheroadgo.com. And now our show.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go's Fringe News, which we haven't done in probably about a month now. And I am here with Joshua Cutchin.
Hello, everyone.
Wren Collier.
Hey, everybody.
And Melissa Martel.
Good evening.
And we have some fairly interesting stories to go over in this edition. And I want to start with this one that kind of follows up one that we did, I think, in the last episode that Rojan sent over to me. And that's a second man mysteriously burst into flames in England, and police are stumped again. So the first one was this guy walking down the street, and he just literally burst into flames. And apparently it has happened again, which, you know, it's weird enough the first time. And the article, this one coming from Newsweek, says a man died after he burst into flames in Hull, England on Wednesday, which was probably a couple weeks ago now. This was from 12/28. After London police issued a plea for witnesses of another similar incident, Daniel Lingwood, a resident of Hull, looked out his window to see flames across the road, according to a local newspaper. He immediately rushed out to help the victim, who has not been named. There were some women going around to get buckets of water to chuck over him, but I have done first aid before, and I knew this would be bad for his skin, so me and another bloke tried to roll him around to the ground and put out the fire. Emergency services were called just after 8 p.m. He was unable to be saved and died at the scene. The police are currently appealing for witnesses. The circumstances around why the man was set alight remains unknown, but Wood said the police are not currently looking for anyone in connection with the incident. So, yeah, that's.
I think this is unique too because, most cases of spontaneous human combustion you hear about take place in homes.
Yeah,
and they're usually discovered after the fact. Very rarely does anybody walk in on somebody who is spontaneously combusting. So to have it happen on streets in broad daylight, definitely sets it apart.
And I mean, there's no combustible, there's no any chemicals or gas on him, and he's walking. Usually people are kind of sitting down and not moving and not kind of functioning when they have to meet this unfortunate end.
Now, the one thing is no one saw them burst into flames. They only saw them after they were on fire.
Yeah.
So there could be something else going on that's different from, say, spontaneous human combustion. This one says he was a frail elderly man with a walking stick, so it does fit with the old, usually it's older people. But it's, maybe someone set him on fire and took off when no one was looking. You know? I mean,
I thought of that.
Yeah,
It was Spring Hill Jack.
Right.
Yeah, because it said there was a lack of accelerants, but that mainly means that no one dumped gasoline on him and set him on fire. But somebody could have, set his jacket on fire with a lighter or something.
And if he's old enough, he might not have been able to put it out in time before it spread.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, you could have somebody doing serial arson or something.
At the same time, I'm always struck at how difficult it is to get certain substances or certain materials to light that accelerant.
Yeah.
I most of the time that I see things that I think are going to go, straight up, unless they're an extremely flammable material or something, it's actually surprisingly hard to get clothing. Yeah, to get clothing to do that. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, a lot of synthetic clothing does easily catch fire if it's synthetic polyester or polymix or something.
It's a good point.
So it can, as far as I know, it's still a mystery.
They haven't. Yeah, they find it. I mean, don't they claim that they find it very mysterious that they're not, claiming that they have any suspects or they think any foul plays happened yet?
Yeah.
So they're pretty baffled by it. Sounds from the article, anyways, unless I read it wrong.
No, they have no idea what happened or why.
It's kind of creepy.
Yeah, exactly.
What's going on in England?
But again, again, the fact that you get two of them this close together, they're both elderly people, they're both in England, makes me think someone might be behind it.
Maybe.
Yeah, that sets off the red flags for sure.
Yeah, I mean, for this to have happened in the same 3-year period in England would be sort of a cluster, a really sort of noteworthy cluster of spontaneous human combustion. But for this to happen under similar circumstances this close, it really does raise some eyebrows.
Yeah. And speaking of fire, Red Pill brought this one up last week. He's unfortunately not able to join us tonight to talk about it, but Australian birds have weaponized fire because what we really need now is something else to make us afraid.
Only in Australia.
Raptors, including the whistling kite, are intentionally spreading grass fires in northern Australia, a research paper argues. The reason is to flush out prey and feast. This comes from the National Post. So yeah, I mean, but that implies that they're understanding fire. They've evolved to understand fire and know how to use it.
They're using a tool like we would use a tool to carve up a deer or an animal. Like, that's evolution.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and birds of prey are especially smart at this kind of thing. I mean, I don't know how many of you heard about the Taco Bell raven, but
no.
like
this is new to me. Taco Bell raven.
Yeah, there was a raven or a crow. I can't remember. It was a corvid, put it that way. And it, I guess, had been watching people go through the drive-thru, like exchange money and get tacos. And it was an anecdotal story, but I want to believe that this guy wrote that he went outside and this crow came up to him and dropped out of its beak like a nickel or a quarter or something, and looked at the food that he was holding, and he got the impression that it was trying to buy it from him.
Crows are so clever.
Yeah, so he took out a taco and gave it to him, and it flew off with it. And he was like, yeah, I learned how to shop for food just by watching people do it. And knowing how smart they are, I can believe that story.
I wonder what if this bird has witnessed, I don't know, air bomb, what has it witnessed? So it's I can grab this fire and smoke out my prey.
Yeah.
It really does underscore the fact that, intelligence comes in a lot more shapes and sizes than we appreciate. And I can't help but, sort of chuckle and smirk at the similarities between that and the myth of, just sort of a lot of the myths and legends of certain indigenous people who talk about, birds of prey literally going and retrieving fire, in certain creation myths.
Yeah, I mean, they mentioned in the article that the Aborigines knew about this forever. They've always known that the birds do this. And I mean, part of me thinks that the birds saw how animals would flee the fire and thus kind of made that connection in their head. Well, if there's fire, then there's food.
Yeah.
And then learned that they could do that. I don't think it's a huge stretch. I mean, like I said, birds of prey especially are extremely intelligent, and this kind of behavior has been observed in other species. So it's really neat.
The longtime firefighter is adamant that the birds he's observed picking up twigs and starting new fires were doing so on purpose.
Is this a first? I wonder if it's a first in this species. It would be interesting to know.
It says that despite years of trying, the authors also failed to find unequivocal photo or video evidence of the birds spreading the fire. But it sounds like this is something that they've believed that they could do.
Okay.
Most accounts and traditions unequivocally indicate intentionality on the part of the three raptor species. It's just that they're looking for evidence to prove that they know what they're doing.
But I mean, it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility of other observed behavior, like not only that Wren mentioned, but also just birds dropping shellfish from certain heights to ensure that they actually break open. I mean, it's nothing if not consistent.
True. But the headline's great: weaponized fire. And I think
it kind of reminds me of that term kind of reminds me of the bat bombs from World War II. If anybody's familiar with the bat bombs?
No, maybe.
I'm vaguely familiar with it.
It was apparently a project that the U.S. military had started in order to like do firebomb attacks on Tokyo and other Japanese cities during World War II. But the idea was that you had a bomb that was filled with like hundreds of little tiny Mexican bats that had like little timed napalm charges on their backs. And you'd drop it into a city and it would like parachute in and it would release the bats and they would go find and like roost in all these houses and stuff, spread out over miles. And then after the timers ran out, they would explode into flame and set all these buildings on fire.
Oh, wow.
And they spent millions of dollars on this project. Like we actually had an airfield that belonged to us that accidentally burned down because some of the bats got loose and blew up one of our own airfields. But then, like, apparently, like, the atomic bomb research was coming to an end, and they were about to use the bomb, so they kind of dropped the bat bomb project.
Huh.
Slightly more efficient, that nuclear bomb.
A little bit, a little less silly, yeah.
Yeah, the I like the idea that if the nuclear bomb was the Manhattan project, the bat bomb was like the Newark project. slight step down.
It's the Gotham project.
And I don't know that we ever talked about this. This goes back a little bit, probably about a month and a half now. But it's this GIF of these power lines jumping up and down. And,
yeah, I shared that a while ago.
Yeah, and it kind of went viral. And so basically, people were hearing a thud when watching this completely silent GIF, and that's really interesting to me. And I know a lot of people just kind of gloss over and go, oh, yeah, that's pretty cool or whatever. But it shows us just how our perception works and how deceptive our perception can be. Personally, I didn't hear it, but apparently most people do.
I could see how, like, because when you're listening to it, your eyes see it moving and you're expecting...
Yeah.
Your expectation of that sort of causes your ears to react.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can see it from that perspective. But yeah, I mean, it does show that. I mean, it could go like if you see something that you think is paranormal, but it could have a natural explanation, that maybe it would cause your body, just from thinking that's paranormal, for you to have the hairs on the back of your neck to stand up, or
right.
It could cause you to have that reaction. Possibly, I can't say for sure, but it does say a lot about perception, for sure.
I suspect that the reason that people, because I don't hear it, I feel it almost more than I hear it. But I suspect that the reason that people are having that reaction is because it looks like they actually took the time to edit in the edges of the GIF sort of trembling, which gives it, I think, more of an immersive sort of aspect. But it does say a lot about how certain. I don't think our senses are as discrete as a lot of people would have us believe, that that they're separated and they're walled off, and there is this sort of bleed through that you get, obviously visually and in terms of bleeding into the auditory realm, but but it also works. It also works. Your brain can tell you that things are there that aren't there, but similarly, stimuli can help you can. From your senses can also convince your brain that things are there that are not there as well. Specifically, I'm thinking about the way that smell can really trigger a strong memory.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, yeah, I think that in terms of the way that that our senses and our perception of the world overlap and interface with one another is really exemplified by that. And there are apparently other GIFs like this that you can find out there, but this is one of the best examples that people have seen of a GIF that you can hear.
And I wonder if it's just big things, because I mean the idea the idea is that your ears are reacting, by closing off a bit to protect themselves, and that would be because if something that big really did jump into the sky and came down, it would be very, very loud.
Did we describe exactly what the GIF is of?
It is I said it's a bunch of power lines jumping up and down.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if you were there seeing that, it would be very, very loud, so your ear might close up to do that. It could also just be that your brain's filling in something it thinks should be there.
Yes.
because our brains do that. Our brains do not, what you see in your visceral spectrum and everything else is 90%, it's almost like a DVD. You know, when you have compression on video files and stuff, it reuses the stuff that's already there when it can to reduce the amount of data that it's using. And our brain kind of does that too. It doesn't check every second or every millisecond to make sure everything's still the same. It kind of just goes, no, everything's still the same. Oh, something moved. Okay, that thing's different. And so I don't think it functions the way people think it functions. And this is why things can go right by us, because we expect things.
Yeah.
And our brain. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you were a power that could tap into that, it could be immensely useful and immensely powerful in terms of being able to manipulate people.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wren?
I mean, we really like a narrative. Like, we like to have like a story, and that's why our brains don't like gaps, because we like to have a nice smooth explanation and narrative. And of course we sort of pick from our own little treasure trove of knowledge of what we already have as an experience. It's the easiest shortcut to do is to pick from what you already know. And if what you already know is science-based, then you're going to pick from that. If what you know is ghosts, you might pick from that. If what you already know is and of course the biggest shortcut is it's going to vibrate and make a sound in this case, but I like to expand it in other scenarios. But we really do like a nice smooth storyline that makes sense and a narrative that we can follow.
Any thoughts, Wren?
I mean, I definitely hear it.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. It's almost involuntary. I wonder almost too. It feels like a weird balance between like involuntarily hearing this like weird sort of sound when it does it, and like a mix of you using your imagination.
Yeah, because as soon as you see the headline of the GIF you can hear, you're primed.
Exactly. So I wonder how much. What's the ratio there? Like, what ratio am I hearing it because like I'm imagining I'm hearing it versus like some sort of involuntary reflex in my middle ear or something.
Yeah, I didn't hear it as much as I like almost stiffened up because I was anticipating a feeling. It was more of the anticipation, but I didn't actually hear something.
All right, and I mean, to me, that's almost like that dress thing that went viral.
I was thinking the same thing.
And people got really annoyed with that. They were like, I don't want to hear about the dress. But to me, that was interesting, and we talked about this. It was interesting because it shows us how easily our perception can be different when you're looking at the same thing. I mean, when people argue over opinions and things like that, I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, we have different perceptions. We have different ways of viewing the world. These are not things to necessarily be argued about so much as, an interchange between people.
I think too, because I'm looking at this other GIF you can hear, which is a loop of husky dogs like howling. And yeah, I could kind of hear them. So like, I wonder how much we tend to think of each sense. I think Josh is getting this too. We tend to think of each sense as like a discrete entity into itself, when in reality, like our entire sensorium kind of works together to provide an image of what we observe as reality or what we sense.
It's like a sensory suite.
Exactly. It's like you hear things, but your hearing is complemented by your vision, and your sense of touch is complemented by like what you can hear, and your vision as well. It's like all of these things work together, because I feel like a lot of the time you anticipate something based on your other senses before you encounter it. I mean, like how often do you look at something that looks gross and it puts like a sour taste in your mouth,
Oh, sure.
It's like all your senses kind of work together to create what's the right word? Like a gestalt of what you're looking at.
Yeah.
And the better we understand how these things work, the better we can understand those liminal fringe things that make up the paranormal, because they're really playing on those senses that don't quite, because we don't quite know what we're dealing with. It could very well be that we're picking these things up and giving them their own, like Bigfoot could be a flesh and blood creature, or we could be coming across weird energy in the woods, and our brain is saying, I don't know, Bigfoot,
Run, it's a predator.
And it may very well become a Bigfoot as soon as, our brain puts that identification on it. It might be something not fully formed.
Yeah.
And I think that's even more the case where you have these one-off monsters. If people are genuinely seeing these things, it could be that, they're coming across something their brain can't quite put together. It's never encountered it before. It's never seen anything like it. So it says, monster, and puts a face on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it's thrown in with a dash of the collective unconsciousness, too,
Yeah. All right, so this one's also... all these stories are interesting in their own ways. Doctors discover mysterious attacks on U.S. diplomats in Cuba caused brain abnormalities. This is from the beginning of December, and just these attacks in Cuba were very interesting because it was just a small range of diplomats that were affected by this, and it was audio in some way, and it did a lot of damage to them.
How did they hear the audio?
Did they? I don't even know what they heard.
It demoed the sound, but I was like, I was trying to understand, and I can't remember like how it was exposed to them.
I think they just heard it. I don't think there was any obvious source.
Also, just randomly in the environment.
Yeah, loud, mysterious sounds followed by hearing loss and ear ringing had led investigators to suspect sonic attacks. So, I mean, the same way that they can make posters kind of speak to you if you're in the right position. I think that these things, this was targeted at these people.
What I thought was interesting, the article put forth the idea that the sound and that they heard and the hearing loss and everything could have been the result of something else, not necessarily an actual sound, but like of something happening in their brain. Mm-hmm. Sort of like how people, right before they have a stroke, they smell bacon or burnt toast or something, like maybe the sound that they heard wasn't a real sound. It was some sort of hallucination that happened because of whatever was affecting their brain. Because the article said that they did have abnormalities in their brain. So
right, but what would have caused the abnormalities is the question.
Yeah, because usually sonic attacks, they say, don't affect the white matter in your brain.
Yeah.
I mean,
so that's why they're ruling that out, right?
Yeah, because people do ultrasound in people's brains. I mean, to do like imaging and stuff, like ultrasound isn't damaging to a brain. It's more like I'm sort of leaning towards the idea that they may have been exposed to some sort of like viral, chemical, or like fungal thing that could have done something to their brain. I don't even know if it was like I don't necessarily even think it was like an intentional exposure to something. Like, weird things happen to people who've been exposed to things like black mold or certain like fungal agents that, that are in their house. They have no idea that they're there, and they can cause things like hallucinations and brain damage.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, were they exposed to some sort of fungus that was
It would
growing
be
in the
interesting. It would be interesting because it says 24 patients. It would be interesting to know where they were and what they were doing. I mean, we don't really know any specifics. That would actually help.
Well, what it says in the article here is that the most frequently reported sound patients heard was a high-pitched chirp or grating metal. Fewer record a low-pitched noise like a hum. Some were asleep and awakened by the sound, even as others sleeping in the same bed or room heard nothing.
Okay, so they were in their rooms.
Yeah, vibrations sometimes accompanied the sound. Victims told investigators these felt similar to the rapid flutter of air when windows in a car are partially rolled down.
I hate that feeling.
I hate that too.
Those worst off knew right away something was affecting their bodies. Some developed visual symptoms within 24 hours, including trouble focusing on a computer screen. I mean, whereas, yes, the sound might have been a side effect, I feel like this was an experiment. I think these people were probably experimented on. And although, the U.S. checked and said they weren't behind it, it's like, oh, well, I'm glad you checked on yourself and,
Yeah, that's not biased.
Given the fact that what we learned in the Kennedy papers, that the CIA was willing to kill American citizens in Miami by setting off bombs and then blaming it on Cuba, and given the fact that we recently established diplomatic relations relationships with Cuba again in a previous president's tenure, and the current political structure is trying to undo all of that. I would not put it past, if I want to get really conspiratorial, that we would attack our own citizens as a pretense to like then blame Cuba and rescind all of the negotiations that were done by the last presidency.
Governments do it all the time. Put their citizens in paranoia and torture them. Like, I mean, in UK, flying air raids around young children and everything, preparing for war. I mean, it happens all the time.
Well, and there's an established interest and precedent in this sort of weaponry. And again, it's been said numerous times, but if you see it in the, the transparent, quote unquote, white world, then in the opaque, quote unquote, black world, it's much more sophisticated and it operates at a level beyond what you can see. To me, this and the Vegas shooter are two of the most compelling modern conspiracy narratives that I actually think have legs in a long time. Regardless of what might be going on with each of these cases, I don't know, but I feel like there's something more in both those cases going on than we are privy to. I don't for 1 minute. I mean, like I appreciate, Wren's sort of idea of possibly some environmental concerns, especially given, the state of the infrastructure in Cuba. I'm sure that they're not tearing down buildings every couple of years like we do in the U.S. And, that obviously, creates a situation where you're more likely to get perhaps some of these hazardous fungi and whatnot. But I feel like this doesn't quite pass the smell test for me in terms of an explanation for what these people are experiencing.
Yeah, it's certainly odd. I mean, I even sort of, if I want to get really out there, I sort of think about the stuff they were talking about in some of the more clandestine parts of the remote viewing program, where they were researching whether or not they could give people heart attacks or brain damage or whatever, through remote viewing. It's not something that like people like Joe McMoneagle really ever go in, but I think we've all heard rumblings about that sort of thing.
Oh yeah.
So maybe it's a continuation of that project.
Well, and again, I think that there's an underappreciated 14 aspect to this as well. I mean, although it doesn't quite map onto the sound that people experience in cases of alien abduction and altered states, there is often a noted presence of a buzz or a hum of some sort that tends to precede those altered states of consciousness. And I think that I don't think me calling the abduction experience an altered state of consciousness would be too controversial to a claim on where did the road go. But I wonder if that there's perhaps not some sort of similar link between that aspect of the phenomena as well.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about what they're reporting, that sort of sudden sound, the feeling of your like the vibrations and stuff, that's literally exactly what happens to me when I have sleep paralysis or have out of body experiences. So, there are certain parallels in this story too to things that I've experienced. So maybe I've got some weird brain damage too, and I should go get checked out.
Are you a secret diplomat?
Not that I know of. I would feel pretty left out if I'm getting experimented on.
You're one of them. You're a socialist down there.
Yeah, I know.
That's why I ran.
All right, let's move on to magic mushrooms do the opposite of antidepressants, but that might be why they work. And this came out in sciencealert.com and beginning of January here. But this is not necessarily, I mean, the idea that magic mushrooms help depression is not a new idea. And when we went over the psychological terms there, one of the things they said is that both, sometimes the suppressants help people and sometimes the opposite help people. And they're like, they don't understand why that would be the case. And I noticed when this was posted to the Where Did the Road Go group, the Facebook group, some people were saying that, like, this stuff can help them, and other people were saying it doesn't. So I think it really is going to end up depending on the person.
Yeah, I think it depends on the individual's specific, like, some people have anxiety symptoms, but they don't actually just have anxiety. Like if they have a personality disorder, like a borderline personality disorder, that's not their only problem. And I think you have to be wary of the individual and what they actually have. Like if you just have depression, I can see, and you don't have any substance abuse issues and serious personality disorders, I could see it being a problem. But if you have depression is one of your symptoms and you have a myriad other, and you have a personality disorder and you have substance abuse issues, I think you might want to be a little more, I'm not sure. Like it's really going to depend on what your specific situation is.
Yeah, it says after the experiment, the majority of patients reported that the psilocybin had eased their depressive symptoms, with almost half the group still seeing benefits from the treatment 5 weeks later, in line with the kind of benefits other depression studies using the drug have shown.
Well,
Yeah.
to Melissa's point, I mean, the opportunity should exist for people um, to experience these sort of substances in a controlled, guilt-free,
Yes.
legal repercussion-free setting.
Yes.
That's one of the main reasons that I haven't done psychedelics. In addition to me being scaredy pants when it comes to legal matters, I want a sitter who is going to take care of me and who knows what to do in case something goes wrong, some sort of adverse reaction.
Yeah.
And we should have that opportunity available to us, and it's quite frankly criminal that we don't.
I knew someone, and this was from experience, is they always thought they just had anxiety, and they went and they experimented with sort of not mushrooms per se, but it might have been a form of ayahuasca and mushrooms, but it didn't help them, of course, because they had a myriad of other problems besides just depression. And so they had substance issues. They had a whole bunch of different problems. So it didn't just stop there for them. But then I've heard people who have done ayahuasca journeys, and it was like an amazing experience for them. So that's why I said, like, you have to really understand what you really have and what you're dealing with and where your trauma comes through. Like it can help someone maybe even get to the root of their trauma. But when they come back to reality and they have to function normally, it's like what, do they have, like, say you had someone who had substance abuse for their whole entire life and they have like, brain damage or something. It's like you have to help them have like a normal functioning behavior first before, like, when all the effects of the drug is done, can they still manage, their behavior and their emotions, and can they function day to day? That's the most important thing, is to take care of that. And so that's why I say it's really important to understand if they just have depression, or do they have a myriad of other problems that it could possibly, for some people, make it better and be amazing, and for some people it could make it worse.
It said the researchers don't know for sure why that is, with the why it works. But after the experiment, the patients reported a greater willingness to accept all emotions post-treatment, including negative ones, whereas they felt their previous depression treatments worked to reinforce emotional avoidance and disconnection. The comments that they got from people were, "I feel much lighter, like something's been released. It was an emotional purging. The weight and anxiety and depression has been lifted." Someone else said, "I have felt a sense of acceptance, more acceptance of agony, boredom, and loneliness. A willingness to accept the negative times, but also an appreciation of the wonderful times." So those are three of the comments. So you kind of get to see that it's doing something slightly different than the medication is. The medication is working as something to get you through. And I've known people who have taken the antidepressants, and sometimes it works great, and other people are like, "I just don't feel anything at all."
Well, I know somebody who, like, in a totally different situation, they were given them antidepressants, and I guess they had a personality disorder. They didn't have depression, and the antidepressants actually made them more suicidal. It was like it was a disaster for antidepressants, right? So it's about being misdiagnosed. And I think it would, like, he said before, like, it would be interesting to have somebody be able to go maybe intravenously and do something like DMT or something where there was no hangups and you were just like, okay, let's try this and quickly and go and see what you experience. In a nice clean situation in a positive environment.
Yes.
And that's important.
It's like a resident Where Did the Road Go, a drugs enjoyer. Like, I mean, I pretty much had the same experience like we were talking about, Soraya, with antidepressants. I recently went through sort of a treatment with antidepressants, and all it really did was just make me completely numb, like feel like a robot. Like,
yeah.
It was like I wasn't depressed anymore, but I also like didn't enjoy anything anymore.
Yeah.
And,
which is part of what depression does to you too.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know, like, I've taken mushrooms, mescaline, all that kind of stuff, and this research doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, even I think Mike has talked about doing or being part of like some research group
Mike
that had to do with like not Mike Cleland, Mike I feel so bad because I can't remember his last name.
Mike Hughes?
Mike Hughes, yeah.
Okay.
Mike Hughes, I remember talked earlier on one of your shows a while back about being part of a research group or being involved with some research into the same topic where he was. And yeah, it's just, this doesn't surprise me at all. And like the comments about how the mushroom allows these people to more emotionally connect with their good feelings and their bad feelings makes a lot more sense to me as a way to lift depression than like just suppressing those emotions, just like making everything duller. That might save you, but it's sort of like treating the symptom, and not necessarily taking care of the root problem. And, at least in my case, the root problem was that, I was emotionally disconnected, that, I was not listening to myself or listening to what I really needed, and thus became depressed because of it. And yeah, so again, it doesn't surprise me at all that taking something that allows you to better accept yourself and better connect with your own emotions would, at least for some people, help them through depression.
Mm-hmm.
All right. From Fractal Enlightenment, I do not see a date on this one, but it says, reality is nothing but a hallucination, says a neuroscientist. Not that this is anything particularly new, but this comes from a TED Talk. And it says, we don't just passively perceive the world, we actively generate it. The world we experience comes as much from the inside as from the out, or from the inside out as the outside in. And that is... that's obviously an Eastern philosophy type of an idea. It's, a Jane Roberts Sethian idea. It is, it's not a new concept. I think the fact that this guy's a neuroscientist is why it, made a headline.
This article sort of irritated me a little bit because it didn't really talk about any of his evidence for this, which if he's like a legitimate neuroscientist, he would have some reason to believe this other than like Eastern religion says so.
Well, there is the TED Talk he did.
Yeah. It's sort of like, part of me thinks that the article phrases it, maybe it's just the way it was written. It like phrases it more towards the idea that this is an idea meant to be taken literally. And I think that's what leads to people believing in things like we're in a simulation or we live in the Matrix. It's like when it's really a more subtle kind of like metaphor about the way we create our emotional and imaginal realities based on how we see the world, rather than it being like literally you create like a video game, your world around you.
Right.
I just found this quote where it says, if you pay attention to how our brain processes information using the best guess system, it always becomes equally important about the information we feed our head. This sort of sounds like it's like a sort of choose your own ending of the story kind of thing. It's like, or what is it that you're paying attention to? Like I could pay attention to something, like someone's not talking to me for a while and I have a need and I want them to talk to me, and I could see that it means that, everything's falling apart, and the reality is they're not talking to me because they're busy, because something happened or there was emergency, and I've chosen one narrative over the other, and therefore I sort of project something into it, and I actually make it happen because I feed the wrong information into my mind, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, you know what I mean? And it's sort of like, okay, so knowing that, why don't I feed a storyline into my mind of what I want to be the best outcome? It's probably better than overreacting. I mean, obviously you want to be aware of what somebody is really doing, but I think you get a sense of that person's personality the longer you know them. And I think sometimes we can feed our own fears rather than what's really happening or the best possible outcome or what we actually really want.
And
Yeah.
I always believe in the hope for the best, prepare for the worst type of scenario. Like I always assume, yeah, everything's going to be fine, but what can I do in case it's not? Like what kind of
Yeah.
safety net can I create in case this is not the best? Just recently I had some massive, hell, not so much massive car issues, so much as expensive car issues. But it was one of those things where I didn't know, and I have two cars, one that was on the road and one that wasn't, that needed some work done. And I said, okay, so best case scenario, my car will be fixed. It's going to cost me pretty much everything I got to fix it, but it'll be fixed. But there's a chance it's not going to be what they think it is, and it might need a whole new engine. In which
Yeah.
case, my better option is to put the other car on the road. So I actually started preparing to get the other car going. And I said, okay, if my car gets fixed, I'm still going to put this other one on the road. I'm just not going to do it quite as quickly. But, that was the preparing for the worst, that my car wasn't going to be fixable. While, assuming and kind of going with it'll be fine, the car is going to be fixable. And it was. So now I have one working car, one that needs a couple of things before it's working. But, that approach generally is the best way to go, I think, because if you think
Yeah.
negatively, you get depressed. You don't want to deal with things. You're just like, oh, everything is lost.
Yeah.
It's like, no, okay, so what's the best scenario? Then what's the most likely scenario? Now, what's the
Yeah.
worst scenario, and how can I make that safety net,
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think sometimes if you start thinking negatively, you almost act like this weird magnet where, like, okay, not just your car goes, but then your laptop starts acting up.
Right.
And then your phone stops working, and then, your boss, blah, blah, blah. Like other things just start happening, and it's sort of domino theory. And I know it sounds crazy, but it just seems to happen that way, where everything just starts going, oh, okay, well, if that's what you want, here you go. Here, we must give you more of it, because otherwise you'll think you're crazy.
Yeah,
I
there's something to the law of attraction. I think that it tends to be overstated, but there's definitely something to it. I really do believe.
and on that as well, I think that when you're in a negative mindset, you're giving off negative energy.
Hmm.
So, just as a simple cause and effect type of thing, if you're someone like me who affects electronics, I know when I'm stressed out and rushing, my computers slow down. And I'll be like, oh, come on, it's me. I know it's me. I should just step away and let you do what you need to do, because I know I'm affecting it, and I'm affecting it because I'm
Yeah.
stressed. And I think I know people pick up on that as well. When you're around someone that's really stressed out or very, upset, it's going to affect you. And how it affects you is different for every person. But I think, that if you're really stressed out and you're around a bunch of people and you make them feel stressed out, well, your day's certainly not getting better from that point.
Yeah, no kidding. That's interesting that you say, it's totally off topic that you affect electronics. Have you ever, like, I just had someone say that to me the other day, that they affect electronics all the time, and they said it started after they had a near-death experience.
That's very, very common.
Yeah.
Um,
My
the
girlfriend's the same way. She's like, I think literally an avatar of chaos, and just like anything electrical or like mechanical she touches, it just falls apart. It's like some stuff happens, it doesn't even make sense to me, like why this happened, because I could do the same thing a million times myself and it would never happen.
yeah, yeah. And I've done some weird stuff, and I've known other people who had weird electrical issues that have done some really weird stuff. and it does seem to, in some cases, relay from like it's almost like it reacts personally to you. I don't know how better to explain that. Like,
Yeah.
it's not just random. There's something else going on with it.
We got to figure out how to flip the script on it and make things work better.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Supercharge everything.
Exactly.
I was just happy to learn how to not affect it as strongly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we're constantly all battling entropy, I don't know if it's possible to flip the script on it.
Yeah,
You know?
that's what I was thinking. Like some people just give up like an entropic field.
Yeah, I mean, so in other words, the cart is already going downhill. You're just giving it a stronger push.
A girlfriend I had years ago would also probably affect stuff even worse than I did. And like, if I was using a laptop and I handed it to her, or vice versa, the laptop would freeze up every single time.
Yeah.
And it's like you'd have to put it down, and then the other person would have to pick it up. You couldn't hand it directly from one to the other. Or we would be, a couple of times we were in the car, and we'd get into, not a serious fight, but enough of a fight that, it would raise the tension a little, and the car would shut off. And I remember this happening in like freezing temperatures, and she started to get mad at me, and the car just stopped, and she just goes, "I'm sorry."
Yeah. I have a friend who's like that, like watches everything just go dead. And I remember one time years ago when we were both still married, like we bought a washer and dryer at the same time. And it was probably about 6, 7 years later, I came to her house and her washer and dryer were like broken and beaten down and da. And mine were still like brand new and immaculate and la 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 la. And she's like, I don't know, I just keep having these problems. It was even with the washer and dryer. She's like, isn't yours worn down? I'm like, no, it's awesome. It's like immaculate. And it was just funny. And it happens with laptops with her and computers and cell phones. She goes through them.
Yep.
And I'll have mine forever. And they're like pristine and they're functioning really well. And I'm like, that's funny. She's just like, it's so expensive. It's costing me so much money.
One of the things Kenneth Ring found doing his Omega project is that people who have near-death experiences and people who have had any kind of alien abduction experience, whatever that may ultimately be, that is one of the effects both of them share, is that they tend to be electrosensitive afterwards.
Yeah.
I would like to see if I'm sure that Ring addresses this because he's a professional butt kicker in terms of his research, but I wonder how many of them have anecdotes about similar things happening before their first recalled experience or before their near-death experience. Wondering if we're not putting the cart before the horse on that a little bit.
I don't think so. I think that was part of the survey.
Okay.
I had like the friend that I was talking about before. She specifically said that after she had her first child, she had a near-death experience, and that's when she started to notice that watches would die all the time. And then, of course, it went on from there as she got more technology, as we became a society more involved with technology. But she started to notice it after she almost died delivering her first child. That there was
Interesting.
that watches and stuff started to die.
Well, and this is one of the fundamental problems that we have with, with science and the unexplained in general, is that there's no ethical way to study this. I mean, you can study people who claim to have had these experiences, but unless you're actually bringing people to flatlining people and then bringing them back, it's difficult to study that under, a laboratory setting.
It's a good movie with Kiefer Sutherland.
That's an awesome movie.
They remade it, right?
However, the remake I just watched, and it is terrible. Absolutely terrible.
I knew it was going to be.
Well, no, I gave it the benefit of the doubt. I thought, let's see what they do with it. No, don't even waste your time.
I just remember the original one being so creepy.
Yeah, the original was excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, Josh, like anecdotally, my friend that recently had a near-death experience and has started, seeing ghosts and things like that. I mean, when we were growing up, she, at least told me that she would see UFOs, and we had some like shared dream kind of psychic experiences between us. And so I don't know. I mean, I honestly haven't looked into that too far to see if these people sort of, maybe manifest these things to a limited extent, and then the near-death experience sort of releases the limiter, and takes the governor off up on it.
Or it could just be that you're connected to another realm and you're bringing in more energy.
Yeah. That's an interesting idea. That's something I should look into.
For any of you and anyone listening who hasn't listened to the 2-part interview I did with Shirley Black about 2 years ago, it was right at the beginning of the year. I highly recommend checking that out because her experiences are absolutely astonishing throughout her 3 near-death experiences, and the amount of research that she's had done on her as well to try and figure out, how this stuff works and stuff. She's going to be coming back on. She does finally have her book done. Actually, she had her book done a while ago, and I just haven't gotten around to finishing it. But she's going to come back on, and we're going to talk about the research and stuff that has been done with her.
All right.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's I think it's really interesting that a lot of the stories that we're talking about all are sort of riding the same through line of perception and how we are interfacing with the world. I think that there's something to that.
True. And now let's completely change it. Scientists claim they have discovered world's earliest representation of a supernova. And this is just kind of interesting. Indian scientists discovered a 5,000-year-old stone carvings they claim depict an ancient supernova. And there's 5,000-year-old stone carvings found in the Kashmir Valley. May represent just what I just said. Their study, published in the Indian Journal of History of Science, reinterprets a curious scene. Since archaeologists unearthed the irregular stone slab in 1969, experts have believed its markings depict a hunting scene with armed men chasing fauna between 2 radiating sun-like objects. Our first argument was there cannot be 2 suns, astrophysicist Mayak Vahia told The Guardian. We thought there must have been an object that appeared and attracted the attention of the artists. And they go to say that their strongest candidate was a supernova, HB9, a star that exploded around 4600 BCE. Upon further research, the team also realized the stone, which measures about 18 by 10 inches, could potentially depict a map of the sky observed one night rather than a simple hunting scene. The scientists transposed the carvings onto a chart of known constellations that surrounded HB9 and realized that the figures could represent celestial clusters seen from Kashmir. The supernova would have exploded near Orion, which fittingly coincides with the carved image of the hunter, as well as Taurus, which would be represented by the central bull of the figure.
This reminds me of, I can't remember exactly whose work it was. You probably will remember this, Sarai, because Red Pill's a big fan of bringing it up. But the depictions of cave art that illustrated different types of plasma effects.
Oh, yeah.
Was it Andrew Collins or Persinger?
Persinger, okay. No, it wasn't Persinger.
That was the brain thing.
Yeah.
God helmet or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
Well, Persinger's been interested in a lot of different stuff, but I don't think it was him. I want to say Andrew Collins or Paul Devereaux or something like that.
No, Collins brought some of this out. The Electric Universe people definitely brought this out. Yeah, he was a plasma scientist who was looking at some of these ancient cave paintings and started realizing that some of these similar symbols that you get all over the world were actually plasma outbursts. They were the exact outbursts you see in the laboratory as they study plasma. And the only ones that were not, there's something like 36 different plasma formations that you can get. Out of those, they represented 32 of them, say. The other 4 they didn't represent. If they saw them, they would have been dead. The radiation would have immediately killed them. So the only ones that were not represented were the ones that would have been deadly. Robert Schoch's theory is that we got hit with such a massive solar flare that it created these plasma outbursts, melted the ice caps, etc., etc. The Electric Universe people think it was a close encounter with Venus, which I don't. I kind of lean toward the Venus explanation myself, which, of course, Velikovsky was the original theorist on that one.
Right.
But, the plasma stuff, those those symbols were there forever, and no one had any idea what they were until this plasma physicist looked at it, and I wish I could remember his name.
Well, I would wonder what this would look like to somebody with an eye for that particular sort of art. with the plasma phenomenon, because I would assume that there would be some sort of serious fallout from being able to witness a supernova. That sort of proximity would have some sort of fallout in terms of its impact on Earth. Is that not? Anybody have any idea? I'm punching above my weight here.
I was wondering if there would be some sort of remains or some sort of evidence that coincided with when they know that these kind of drawings were done. And I mean, I've seen that they have it mapped in the stars, but is there any kind of, like, this would be a huge research project to see if there's any sort of evidence of effects on Earth or what else was going on geologically at that time.
Yeah, I mean, they did find that there was likely supernova that dates to right around the time of the drawing. And I mean, there are supernovas that happen rarely that we can see, and they don't affect us. I mean, we can see them.
Right.
But
they appear like a really bright star in the daytime sky, like almost like a smaller second sun.
Anthony Peratt, I think, is the guy who was the plasma physicist that first made that connection that these cave paintings were plasma discharges.
Okay.
I mean, I'm more on board with the idea that they're like depicting the constellations in this image, and they might be depicting, another suddenly bright star that appeared in the sky, almost as bright as the sun, that then faded away after.
It certainly could be.
And they're sort of expressing it in a more exaggerative, sort of I mean, yeah.
There are also a lot of ancient cultures that speak of Saturn as our second sun. And that has me really fascinated. I have not been able to dig into it too deeply. The Electric Universe have their Saturn configuration idea, which I'm not sure if that's I'm not totally on board with that. But there's other people I've seen talking about this, how Saturn is seemingly at one point is reportedly closer to the Earth than it is now.
I don't know. It's an interesting idea. But
that's
I don't know.
it.
I'd have to read more into that.
And we're taking into account that, like, we're just assuming that these are representations of suns.
Right.
I mean, they could be. I guess.
I think this one was a supernova. I mean, I do. I just think it's an interesting, piece of cave art.
Yeah, and it could just be imaginative too. I think we forget a lot of time that people who make cave art would also make images of, like, what is it, cyanotropic figures or bull-headed figures and stuff like that.
Therianthropic.
Therianthropic, that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, when I create art pieces, I don't necessarily. Sometimes it's very it doesn't necessarily represent something I seen either.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it depends. Like, do we assume because they were sort of what we would see as primordial human beings, that all their drawings represent what actually is, or it's like primitive, or are they capable of representing something that's a metaphor, or that's a symbolic of something that's not actually, it doesn't actually have to be an event. I don't know.
Yeah, I
we
think
tend
it's
to look at it really literally when it could be more metaphoric in nature.
I mean, it could be actual literally. I mean, they could try to be expressing something in the sky, but I don't buy the idea that they're like, duh, I don't know what it is. I think they're probably about as intelligent as we are.
Well, yeah, they could have just been a recording. It's like, this was unusual. Here's where it was in the sky, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Josh?
I was just going to say that I think that the sooner we can all start interpreting peoples of the past through a lens that's very sympathetic with the way that we interact with the world, the better off we're going to be, and the better sort of So, in other words, these people, I feel like if people were making observations, they were probably, even though they were misinformed, they have a level of reliability that's probably comparable to a lot of our observations today. Similarly, it's entirely possible that they might have just been as artistic as we are today. I mean, heaven forbid, some advanced civilization comes back and decides that half of our films are about, something that we actually saw in the real world. So
Right.
You're like,
that's a possibility
whoa,
too.
Jedis? Whoa, they do this
Yeah,
shit?
Yeah.
That's
Ghostbusters was a
crazy.
documentary, Josh.
I so didn't know those humans could move things with their minds.
yeah. It was a long time ago. Even
In a
longer ago for
galaxy far, far away.
that.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I was trying to find real quickly online stuff about Saturn as a second sun, and from Native American myths, the testimony from ancient myth and folklore is adamant that the respective planets once moved on radically different orbits and rained catastrophe from the skies, even if that message has been overlooked and ostracized by virtually everyone. Thus, numerous cultures tell of a time when different suns ruled the heavens. This belief was common in the New World. The idea that the sun was not eternal was shared by American Indian tribes so widely that we consider it must have been part of their belief long before any high culture had arisen in the Americas.
Yeah, but that also assumes that when they say that the sun was not the same ruler or there were other sun, it doesn't necessarily mean that there were literally another sun.
Oh, no, I agree.
But that they saw their sun god as like a different god after a certain period of time, or that it changed somehow to
equally widespread are traditions which report that a dragon-like monster once eclipsed the sun and brought the world to the brink of destruction. Countless cultures preserve memory of the terrifying time when Venus assumed a serpentine form, or when a spectacular conjunction of planets dominated the celestial landscape. Such traditions can be documented from one culture to another, and upon systematic analysis, reveal numerous analogous and
Analogous?
Thank you. Structural details. A telltale sign that they were inspired by common experience of spectacular celestial events rather than creative imagination and fantasy.
See, it does that again. It's like saying that they couldn't just imagine there being a world-eating serpent.
Right, but it's
like
because
they had to have literally seen it.
Well,
it's
maybe it's
because it goes across different cultures.
Right.
Yeah, but that's Gordon.
They're seeing it repeated.
That's Gordon White's whole argument in Starships. That
true.
The reason these people have these shared experiences is because it's like goes back to the sort of Jungian collective unconscious idea that we sort of have these images or archetypes built into our imaginary realm,
or that there was sort of an narrative that was disseminated out from a central.
Exactly.
culture.
Yeah, that's the more Gordon White explanation, that there was some sort of narrative. But yeah, it's sort of like I tend to think of these things being more imaginative or sort of maybe seen in visions or
it's just
after taking mushrooms.
I think it's interesting that they combine it with a hunting scene, because I mean if it's an interesting connection, like supernova explodes, like they're saying it depicts a night scene. Well, no, you don't often hunt at nighttime, so it's interesting that they're combining this supernova scene with hunting. So it says to me that it's not an actual, they're not actually hunting. There's some sort of disconnect there with that, because I don't know.
It's
There's
their
just
form of art.
There's something that disconnects. I'm like, hey, you would hunt when there's daylight, because so you could see and get your
Well, if the supernova was bright enough, it would show up in the daytime.
Okay, that's possible.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. A really good point. But they're saying, I'm just reading from this. They're saying the sky observed one night, rather than a simple hunting scene. So I was just taking from that okay, it's not a simple hunting scene, that and obviously at night it would appear more explosive and large. So I'm like, okay, maybe it happened over an event, maybe they're combining something, but
I think it was their way of recording it.
Finding it. Yeah, I guess maybe they just tie things to hunting.
Well, they also too, it mentions that the different figures in the image might correspond to the different constellations as well, which a lot of people think about the Greek names of the constellations and think that they're Greek in origin, but that's not entirely true. The image of sort of the bull of heaven, or the bull in the heaven as Taurus, is something that existed long before ancient Greece. And the same with Orion. Like Orion the hunter was, a known sort of sky image that people knew about long before people called it Orion.
Yes.
Yeah, dates back to I believe the Mithraic cults predate Greek Greek antiquity, right? That's sort of where we get a lot of that bull imagery.
So this could, like, they're sort of insinuating that this could be sort of a precursor to what we know as sort of Greek mythology and astrology, sort of, and
Gordon talks about that
constellations.
in Starships as well. That it's sort of like these common sort of celestial constellations, weren't an invention of the Greeks. That these the images of the hunter or the bull, or like the fish and all that kind of stuff was something that came from, a sort of narrative long before anyone called them by Greek names. But that each culture like knows Orion. They just have their own name for it.
They could have just been sitting there in by the fire one night looking up the sky, and they were done their gathering and hunting and decided to depict what they saw.
All right,
or
so let's
been studying.
let's have fun with this one. Noah used cell phone to tell son to board Ark. Academic claims.
Woo!
This coming from RT.com.
I didn't know even what to say about this one, so I'll let somebody else talk about it first.
Guys, why is this so funny?
I don't know. I
don't know. So Josh believes it.
Guys, as a like noted partaker in the Twitter account Memory TV, that basically just posts like out of context screenshots from like TV shows in the Arab world. This is like absolutely nothing new for the kind of stuff I see all the time. Like, like I remember seeing a while back, like one of my favorite images was like this like imam talking, and he was like, the SpongeBob who lives under the sea, he lives in a pineapple. How do you think he got that pineapple? Through jihad.
He went on vacation to fly.
So I mean, this is like nothing new for me. So I really love it though. The idea is hilarious, but it's exactly the kind of thing I would expect to come out of Turkey.
So the short article says the story supposedly happened 10,000 years ago, but that doesn't mean Noah wasn't prepared with a piece of modern technology. In fact, he had a cell phone. That's according to Dr. Yuvav Ornek, a lecturer at the Marine Sciences Facility in Istanbul University. Noah used his phone to call his son when he was many kilometers away from him, Ornek said, although he failed to mention whether Noah's phone was a smartphone or a flip phone. There were huge 300 to 400 meter high waves, and the prophet Noah's son was many kilometers away. The Quran says Noah spoke with his son, but how did he manage to communicate? Was it a miracle? It could be, but we believe he communicated with his son via cell phone, Ornek told state-run Turkish channel TRT on Friday. Ornek's unique opinions on Noah don't stop there. He also claims the Ark was built using steel plates rather than wood and that it used nuclear energy. I am a scientist. I speak for science, Ornek said while backing his claims. When it was time to discover whether waters had receded after the flood, which lasted 40 days and 40 nights, Noah didn't use a dove, as the Bible says. Instead, he used a drone, according to Ornek. You see, why would he send a pigeon when there are advanced technologies available, Ornek explained, when the visibly skeptical TRT host asked him whether there was any scientific evidence supporting his claims. The story of Noah's Ark has been the subject of scrutiny and conspiracy theories for decades. In 2010, a group of evangelical Christians said they were 99.9% sure they had found the remains of the Ark on Turkey's Mount Ararat, which, of course, is where it's supposed to have landed.
Well, I mean, so to take a little bit more of a serious sort of approach to this exemplifies the worst of ancient alien theorist thinking. In the fact that sometimes materialist explanations are more ludicrous than non-materialist explanations. Like, I literally find it more believable that if you're going to take Hebraic legends on face value as literal, I find it more believable that telepathy was involved than a cell phone and a drone.
Right.
Like it's literally more believable to me, and it's just I don't. It's sort of people think of people think of Occam's razor again being that the simplest explanation is the most likely, but really it's not. It advises against multiplying complexity unnecessarily. And dang, if that doesn't multiply complexity way unnecessarily, in my opinion.
Well, I mean,
no, it makes everything simple.
I'm just disappointed that this is somebody from a university. This isn't even like a right alt any crazy. This is supposed to be somebody who yeah, I'm like, well, I should go work at why don't I have a job at a university? It's beyond. I mean, honestly, if this is the case, we should be finding tons of cell phone and social media addicted people with their cell phones, buried with them.
There's a few fake ancient cell phones running around out there.
Fake ancient cell phones.
Hoaxes where they said, "Oh, look, time travel."
I do see the opportunity for a wireless commercial though here, where the dinosaurs and the unicorns have AT&T, and Noah has Verizon. It's like, they got dropped. I don't know.
Ding.
But yeah. I mean, it's silly. I mean, I'm a scientist, but I'm still going to interpret this. I'm still going to interpret, Noah's Ark literally.
Yeah.
Come on,
just because you use modern technology and place it in antiquity or something doesn't mean you're using a scientific method.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the thing that gets to me with the whole story of Noah is that Noah is really just a retelling of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Mm-hmm. And you look at that and it's like, okay, so why did these people never go for the oldest versions of these stories? Well, Noah's the one in the Bible. It's like, right, but we can prove that story is the Epic of Gilgamesh, but in an abbreviated form with the names changed.
Well, and but you also do bring up a very good point here, Soraya, which is, as much as we're talking about interpreting this literally or not, you do. There is definitely. I'm convinced, and I will not budge from this, that there is a historical basis for the flood.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
You just look at so much of the international legends that you can find detailing the specific event. Something happened. That's where I think that sort of the work of Randall Carlson sort of dovetails with this a little bit in terms of the catastrophism that affected. Mm-hmm. People during this era.
Well, I mean, this is what Graham Hancock has been saying. He went into detail in Underworld of what may have happened at the end of the last ice age, because you had a sudden melting of the ice caps, which created there was probably a combination of things that happened. This is the problem. It's not like one thing happened. It seems like we went through a period of catastrophe from around like 12,000 BC to probably up to about 6,000 BC, and part of it could have been a solar outburst, or it could have been Venus moving too close to us as it entered the solar system. But whatever melted the ice caps melted them quicker than anything on Earth could have done. There's evidence that it could have been a comet that hit the Earth that actually plunged us deeper into the ice age, and then something else came along, like again a solar outburst or something like Venus, which then melted all of that very, very fast, and it melted it into there was literally an ocean across the northern United States and Canada that suddenly broke out and splashed down into the Pacific. We know this happened. We have the geological evidence for this. So whatever melted it very quickly, and then it just kind of rushed out and raised the sea level 100, 200 feet, whatever it was, that it suddenly went up. Just think about that. If you dumped that much water into the Atlantic Ocean, you're going to have earthquakes, you're going to have volcanoes, you're going to have tidal waves, you're going to have floods. This is all the stuff they talk about in all these ancient accounts of the, of the flood and everything else. Yes. If it was and a lot of that water is also going to be evaporated when it gets hit. So you're going to have massive rainfall on a worldwide scale as that evaporation comes back.
Yep. I don't doubt any of that. I stare at the
Now,
cell phones.
yeah, and I think that it's sad because you have, frankly, garbage like this obscuring the more important, narrative, the more important evidence um, of something like this actually having a historical basis. So yeah, it's exhausting. But I've heard, I have heard sillier things. So
True. Not much. It's a pretty good one. There's this article I didn't share with you guys that I was flipping through, and it came from enlightenedconsciousness.com, which I think is one of the other ones came from. When I get stuff from these sites, I always kind of want to look a little more into it before I go into it, but I didn't get a chance to do that. It does, and even the sources they cite, there's a YouTube video, Science Alert, Heart Math, Above Top Secret. But I'm gonna mention it anyway because it is kind of interesting. It says new research shocks scientists. Human emotion physically shapes reality. And it says 3 different studies done by different teams of scientists prove something really extraordinary. The first experiment, human DNA isolated in a sealed container, was placed near a test subject. Scientists gave the donor emotional stimulus, and fascinatingly enough, the emotions affected the DNA in the other room. In the presence of negative emotions, the DNA tightened. In the presence of positive emotions, the coils of DNA relaxed. The scientists concluded that human emotion produced effects which defy conventional laws of physics. In the second, similar but unrelated experiment, different groups of scientists extracted leukocytes, white blood cells, from donors and placed them into chambers so they could measure electrical charges. In this experiment, the donor was placed in one room and subjected to emotional stimulation consisting of video clips which generated different emotions in the donor. The DNA was placed in a different room in the same building. Both the donor and his DNA were monitored as the donor exhibited emotional peaks or valleys measured by the electrical responses. The DNA exhibited the identical responses at the exact same time. There was no lag time, no transmission time. The DNA peaks and valleys exactly matched the peaks and valleys of the donor in time. The scientists wanted to see how far away they could separate the donor from his DNA and still get the effect. They stopped testing after they separated the DNA and donor by 50 miles and still had the same result. No lag time, no transmission time. That much doesn't really surprise me. There have been other things that have been tested like that. I mean, there seems to be just the way that you have that connection between electrons, no matter how far they're separated. It's not, to me, that isn't overly shocking. The third one they threw out here is the DNA in the third experiment proved something pretty shocking. Scientists observed the effect of DNA in our physical world. Light photons, which make up the world around us, were observed inside a vacuum. Their natural locations were completely random. Human DNA was then inserted into the vacuum, and shockingly, the photons were no longer acting random. They precisely followed the geometry of the DNA. Scientists who were studying this described the photons behaving surprisingly and counterintuitively. They went on to say we are forced to accept the possibility of some new field of energy.
Or fields of energy that people have talked about in esoteric tradition for centuries.
Right, exactly.
Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, but the source of the article makes me say, well, we can't really just take this at face value. I don't know, It's not like it's listing where this research was coming from.
There's
at
no
the
sources.
Same and at the same time, none of this is that surprising to me if true.
Right. I mean, not only is it, I think it says something about the state of science reportage nowadays. The fact that, I mean, even if this came, if you read this in Smithsonian, a lot of it wouldn't sound surprising either. And this sort of underscores a couple of things. Well, first of all, it gives me pause. If true, it makes me reconsider a lot of the sort of new agey kind of garbage that you hear about elevating your DNA in terms of alien abductions and whatnot. But the other thing is that, and I've said this for a while, and I think it's going to continue that way. Their science is starting to look like our science, and it will continue to look more and more like our science. And not to really underscore being tribal about our beliefs or our interests, but materialism as a whole is coming around to embracing a lot of the ideas that those interested in esoterica have been talking about for a while. And if you were to look at some of these articles and some of these thoughts that are coming out, if they had been said by somebody interested in fringe topics in the 70s, you'd have been greeted with men in white coats. But now that they're becoming more and more mainstream and more part and parcel of the scientific discourse.
True enough.
The end.
Yeah, of course I would be interested to see if, there's a meta-analysis and it's peer-reviewed or where it's published or anything like that.
I mean, it's definitely interesting. And like I said, not particularly surprising. So, you posted one to the Where the Road Go group, Melissa. This says how human brains are interconnected through a type of Wi-Fi, which explains why people have gut feelings. And not totally disconnected from what we just talked about. This came from the Daily Mail in the UK. Scientists believe they have uncovered the secret behind the gut feeling, claiming the human brain has a form of Wi-Fi, which is constantly gathering information on other people simply by looking at them. He believes his work...
Wi-Fi.
Huh?
Oh, I was going to say the word Wi-Fi is a bit weird in this context, but go ahead.
Yeah, but I think it's just being used as an analogy.
Phrase.
Yeah, something people can understand. Professor Digby Tatum of the University of Sheffield has been researching the human brain and how people communicate. He believes his work shows that language only plays a limited role when it comes to communication. He talks about professional poker players picking up tells from their opponents. And then he says that people can pick up on subliminal information. He has a book out on it called Interbrain. And he said, we can know directly about other people's emotions and that what they are paying attention to. It is based on direct communication between our brains and other people's, and between their brain and ours. I call this the interbrain. He claimed humans are drawn together at football matches, concerts, and religious ceremonies because of the concept of the interbrain. Being in a crowd mode may also make us experience what we would what it would be like to transcend our perspective, our time, our place, and our capacity to feel for a moment like a driving being. Although he warned that communicating through video calls can interrupt this process and cause harm. He added emotional contagion occurs at the speed of light, not the speed of electronic transmission. Face-to-face visual input is accompanied by sound, by gesture, by the smell of sweat, by the possibility of touch, and by a connect.
I found that the article interesting, but I think a lot of those things, people are really reading really subtle body language cues.
Oh, certainly, yeah.
And no, I can't say all of it, but I thought it was an interesting article, like when he was declaring that you can't pick up on sweat and smell and stuff, and it made me think, okay, what?
You mean on like a
what
video?
Am I picking up? Like what? Like because I talk to a lot of people via text, and a lot of us, like I talk to a lot of people that way, and it made me a little bit like, oh, should I trust them? I can't, I'm not right there in real time.
I would argue that not being able to pick up on smells like sweat and whatnot, at least on a subconscious level, is, from what I'm familiar with olfactory science, is demonstrably untrue. Maybe not consciously, but from a subconscious level, it's I would be very surprised if it wasn't true that there was some sort of subtle influence there.
I'm always relying on body language and eye contact and I don't know, just intuition. Like if I know somebody and I'm talking to them even via Skype or have a relationship with someone, I can tell just by behaviors if I think they're being dishonest and something's changed, or they talk to me. Like, I don't need them to be right in front of me. If they stop talking to me or something changed, I know right away something's up, or they're not being honest. I can pick up on certain things just from that alone. So I'm not sure what happens, and I don't know if there's pheromones or there's sweat or I don't know what's going on there, but I think body language is more powerful than anything.
Right.
But what he's suggesting is that there's yet another level there that we communicate essentially psychically, is what he's saying. That there's some psychic interplay between us and other people. And from my experience, I would say that's true. I mean, there are people who I can walk up to and know all kinds of stuff about them I shouldn't know.
Yes.
And there are other people who are like not even there when I walk up to them. Like I feel like they're just blank, and they're obviously not blank, but for whatever reason, I can't interface with that. And I think that's something anyone can do. It's just a matter of, I mean, it's something that came sort of naturally to me over time. But I think anybody could probably train themselves to do it if you just kind of like open up to it. But I don't think everyone can connect with everyone. I
was going to ask you, do you think some people can cut off from you, or there's just some people that naturally connect, or?
I think there's both. I think there are people who can kind of shut other people out. But I think there's also, everyone has their own frequency, and some frequencies connect better than others.
Perfect, yeah.
Guys, we're getting into real Jedi stuff here. Seriously.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because I think I agree on that level, because it's just there is a connection, but the idea of Wi-Fi then sort of relates to it, because shutting it on and off.
Sure.
Yeah, and I don't know. I have to go over the article a little bit more, but it seems to me that Wi-Fi, I don't know, there's a little more of an organic sort of chemically sort of converging element that doesn't relate to Wi-Fi. It's more spiritual.
I think to discount like he sort of does the influence of things like microfacial movements and pheromones and sort of like the chemical biological error that everyone gives off to is a little disingenuous. I mean, yeah, like I'm a person who believes that, we do communicate with each other on some psychic or subliminal level, but there's also a lot more to it as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it all that stuff kind of comes into play in the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, I have to say, I won't say any specific. I've had some really insane experiences when I've connected with people, and I thought I knew something about them or I trusted them, and then there was a communication in dreams that was warning me about something that I hadn't picked up on from them, and it was literally like I had a dream. Yeah, there was an insane dreams on even relationships, and I knew I should have listened to it, and I didn't, and it turned out to be like so prophetic and so right. And if I had listened to him, I would have avoided like catastrophe. It felt like the ball was already rolling, things were already on the way, and I ignored the dream, and but it was like something else beyond just dealing with that. Like it was like, oh, hey, those things were there, but you were just closed off to them. But it's almost like the dream was saying, hey, you missed this, and it was trying to like convey it to me. And I don't know what's that. It was really intense, and it was very accurate, and on many times.
If nothing else, that's your subconscious saying, "Hey, dummy, look at this info that you're ignoring because you don't want to see it."
But it was so like it was just really eloquently purveyed. Like the metaphor was so I knew what it was saying right away, but I had already put certain things in motion, and I was like, oh, I can't stop it. Why couldn't you said this like 2 weeks ago? Like, I know you're helping me, but you could have showed up a little bit sooner.
All right. Well, anyone else have anything?
I don't have anything.
All right. That sounded like a whistle rather than a cricket.
It was a cricket, damn it.
Yeah, but it sounded like a whistle.
No, it was a whistle cricket.
I want to throw this out there, and I've mentioned this before. There's a podcast called Spines, and they are just starting their 3rd season, and it's really, really good. So if you like creepy, weird podcasts, check out Spines. There's an atmosphere there, and I forgot how much I liked it until I listened to the 3rd season opener tonight, and I was just like, oh yeah, I really like this. This is really good. There's also one I just started called, I think it's called Empty, if I'm not mistaken. And there's literally one episode up, which was highly disappointing because I really wanted more, because it was like part 1 of 2, and I was like, oh, where's 2? Oh, it doesn't exist yet. It's called Empty, and it's about these people on a spaceship that has been sent out to colonize another galaxy. So they're moving at the speed of light. They're moving out, however many thousands of years before they get to this other galaxy, and they wake up and their memories are just distorted and gone, and they don't exactly know how far away they are, and nothing. The ship is all kinds of messed up, and they realize they haven't gotten any radio or any communication from their home galaxy in something like 10,000 years.
That can't be good.
Yeah. It's called. I mean, it's the actual podcast is called Empty, but I think they keep calling it Empty Universe. So it's kind of implying that these are the last. They've kind of woken up and there's no one else out there.
Oh, geez.
Interesting.
Wow.
So, but like I said, there's only one episode. So,
way to take us out on a chipper note there, Soraya.
Yeah.
The cold blackness of the universe.
However, there are 2 full seasons of the Spines, and like I said, Spines. If you like creepy and weird, go check out Spines, because that one's definitely up there. Any other recommendations from anyone?
No, everybody needs to go listen to Mabel.
Yes.
It irritates me sometimes, but it's great. Trying to think of anything else that I just started. Dark on Netflix.
Oh, I started that as well. I really like it so far.
I like it so far too. It's not candy coated like Stranger Things is. It takes a little bit more work to get through.
This is the one from like Norway or something?
Germany. Yeah.
Germany.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, of course it's not candy coated.
Exactly. It takes a lot more effort and a lot more. You have to be paying a lot more attention. This is not like a second screen, not a second screen experience, from what I can tell.
My stepfather was from Germany, and he used to tell me some of the bedtime stories that he was told to go to sleep, and I was looking at him going, did your parents love you, or like did they not? Like, what's going on? Like, I was like, I would never tell my son that story.
Well, it's like the Grimm fairy tales, they're not they're not pleasant experience.
All right, well, I thank you guys. Tell people where they can find you. Let's start with Melissa.
Well, I have my own personal website, which is scarletart.rocks. Scarlet has 2 T's. I'm also working on another project. I can't announce it right now, but the next time hopefully I'm on, I will announce it, and it's going to be pretty cool. You can also find me on Facebook as Melissa Martel or Scarlet Art, and that's it.
Wren?
You can find me at liminalroom.com and on Twitter as at Mr. spelled out MISTER_APOL, APOL.
And Joshua?
Oh, you people know where to find me. Here, joshuacutchin.com, books on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
When's your next book coming out?
The Smart Money is on May of this year. That's what I'm anticipating. There are about 3 more books in the pipeline at Anomalist. But the contract's been sent off, and it's just a matter of time now. So, coming up soon.
Awesome.
Trust me, you will be the first to hear about it, folks.
All right. Thank you all.
You're welcome.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
And a special thanks to our Patreons who are pledging at the $10 or above level. John Eddy, Chris Elmquist, Patricia Giaquinta, Allison Cook, Robert Groom, Christopher Sheehan, Roland Belstedt, Kevin Shrek, Super Inframan, Alfred Tuttle, Carla Mahoney, and Gabriel Zero. Thank you very much. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.